Monk Gregory, who settled to live in an old hunting lodge near the forest lake by the village of Pogrebnoi, was immediately noticed and respected by the locals. He was an elderly man, appearing to be in his 60s, tall, muscular, and sturdy. He came to the village for supplies but, having no money, helped the elder repair the roof and build a reliable fence for to soldier widows. After the tragic war with the French, which claimed many men's lives, the village women looked at the survivors with special respect. Even the recluses, who usually avoided society, now became valuable in helping with the household chores. Everyone in the village believed that Monk Gregory was a serious man, a former officer who had sent many enemies to the other world for the fatherland and preferred solitude. In the forgotten village, surrounded by forests, every person was valuable. Throughout the summer season, the monk came to the village from his modest forest retreat, helping the local residents and receiving milk, vegetables, and bread in return. He tried not to kill animals, having seen too much death. Andrejka, the elder's grandson, often saw him sitting by the lake on a makeshift fishing platform, with a fishing rod and a jug of milk. Children spied on him, despite their parents' prohibitions. He noticed them, smiled, and prayed for their health. But by order of the elder, he strictly forbade children from approaching the lake, waving a stick at them and frowning. The only one he didn't drive away was Fedit, a simple village man. Fedit, who settled nearby, preferred to live in the vicinity of the monk's sanctuary. Gregory prayed for his soul and often read prayers to him, but never allowed him to enter his house or go to the lake. At the lake, surrounded by gloomy forests, all adult residents of Pogrebnoi had a special fear. No one swam or fished there, especially after the disappearance of a student naturalist from Moscow University, who came to study the lake and its surroundings. He disappeared after 2 weeks of staying in his hunting lodge, and he was never found. Neither the local residents, nor the police, nor the hunters could unravel the mystery of the lake, which seemed endlessly deep and frightening. For as long as the villagers could remember, no one dared to swim or fish there. A decade or so ago, a student naturalist from Moscow University arrived in the village. He came, as he put it, to study the lake and its surrounding nature. He settled in the hunting lodge for the summer, but suddenly vanished after 2 weeks. He stopped coming for supplies to Pogrebnoi. Locals, county police, and hunters scoured every inch around the lake, but found no trace of him. To brave souls even dove nearby, poking and prodding with a slender boat and a pole. Yet, with the same result. Why only above the shore? Because the lake, surrounded by oak forest, was extraordinarily deep, almost bottomless, to put it simply. The lake itself was small, nearly perfectly round, about 30 fathoms in diameter. Not a single pole, not even 2 or 3 lashed together, reached the bottom. That's why men, women, and children feared it and kept their little ones away. Instead, they'd go for a dip in the Belenkaya River, not as clear as the lake water, but it brought peace of mind. Still water seemed much more dangerous to superstitious folks than flowing. That's how it was believed, and so it was. As autumn approached, the monk redoubled his efforts, fortifying the old dwellings and hanging fish racks with rows of gutted and salted fish. He stocked up on vegetables and flour from the village, enough to last him until spring. After all, come winter, the snowdrifts here could swallow a man up to his waist, and it's a good 1.5 miles to the village. In his spare moments, Gregory enjoyed sitting on the wooden platform, jutting into the lake, 3 fathoms deep, so the gentle waves lapped around him, soothing his soul. True, by the end of summer, the crystal-clear water of the lake turned greenish, and the fish became scarce, but the allure of the place for the recluse remained unchanged. There's always something enticing in the dance of fire and the pulse of water. A sailor from Pogrebnoi, a descendant of Sharina, claimed in a letter to his mother that even the most dreadful storm at sea is not devoid of its allure. In his clumsy verses, he described the ocean's fury, which, it seemed, warmed his mother's heart. Sharina herself couldn't read, but the village elder read his letter to her every month, bringing her joy. However, a year later, news arrived that her son had been swept overboard by a wave during a storm off the coast of Africa, where the ship was headed. Soon after, the old woman herself passed away, unable to bear the heavy blow. Just a week after the monk helped her with the fence, Sharina was buried, and Gregory took the letter with its poetic lines about the sea and the storm, with the elder's permission, of course, and the monk spent long hours gazing at these lines, as if they reflected raging waves and endless expanses of the ocean. Gregory read them aloud, sitting on his favorite platform, closing his eyes and imagining that he was surrounded by the ocean, not a modest lake. He was particularly inspired when a strong wind raised waves on the lake, and the trees around rustled and swayed. In their sound, the old man heard the storm that engulfed his platform. Every person is free to dream of the most incredible things, and no one can forbid them. On a windless Sunday evening, the monk sat on the platform, traditionally reading aloud the verses from the letter and silently praying, recalling his sins. By evening, the forest sounds subsided, interrupted only occasionally by the chirping of invisible birds, hopping from branch to branch of the towering oaks, darkening in the fading light. Some unknown owl flew over the quiet surface of the lake, hooting twice and disappearing into the dense thicket. After finishing his prayer, the old man didn't go home. As always, he remained on the platform until the darkness fell, until the round moon rose, tinted in red light, and covered the lake with grey mist. Torn shreds of mist gently moved over the water, covering the shore and the space under the platform. To a casual observer, it would seem that the monk, like a deity, was sitting on a cloud, swaying beneath him. The quiet, slow breath of the beautiful natural phenomenon didn't last long. The water in the lake suddenly boiled, forming circles from the center to the shores, pushing obedient mist ahead of it and revealing the surface to Gregory's gaze. Then the water calmed down as quickly as it had become turbulent. Now before the hermit's eyes in the water, right in the center of the white lunar strip, very close to the platform, was the head of a girl with light hair framing her bare shoulders, and her face. Monk Gregory, who had served for 40 years, had been to many places, met many beautiful women, and even fallen in love with some, not only within his own country, but such a beautiful, attractive female face he had never seen. Perfectly symmetrical features, slightly illuminated by huge expressive blue eyes, a straight nose with a slight curve, full sensual lips. The hermit involuntarily tried to find at least one flaw, at least one deficiency in the appearance of the unexpected guest, but could not. And then the girl climbed onto the platform and lay down on the wet planks, behind Gregory, blocking the way home. However, overwhelmed with surprise and admiration, the monk did not think of leaving. He couldn't take his eyes off the completely naked girl, shamelessly lying in front of him. Only one thing worried the monk. When the mysterious guest climbed onto the platform from the lake, it seemed that her legs were merged into one, ending with a wide, dark divided fin and shining too brightly in the deceptive moonlight. However, after a moment, the long, graceful female legs, perceived as absolutely normal and exquisite, evoked emotions in him, but not alarm. "Who are you?" the monk struggled to utter, feeling the blood boiling in his veins as the irresistible attraction made his reason forget about vows, prayers, and the burden of committed sins. Gregory's tongue froze, his hands clenched on his knee-length shirt, and his legs, treacherously weakened, could not carry him away. "Are you a mermaid? Why have you come?" "God, answer." Gregory stumbled over his words, bewildered by the silent, naked beauty before him. "Come tomorrow, when the moon rises, and read poetry," came the melodious whisper of the temptress. Her smile, light and elusive, barely touched her lips before she rose and approached Gregory, her gentle hands resting on his shoulders, enjoying his intense gaze. Then, she gently kissed Gregory's frozen cheek and, arching gracefully, slid into the water, her legs transforming into a flexible tail, shimmering in the moonlight. From somewhere deep within the lake came a playful laughter. And then all was silent. The mist began to creep back over the lake, as if commanded by an unseen ruler. Gregory spent another hour on the platform, as if in chains. Then he rose heavily and, swaying, made his way to the watchtower. Night prayers were forgotten. Before his mind's eye always loomed the image of the naked beauty of the mermaid, eclipsing everything else. The recluse could not close his eyes until dawn. And even then, a heavy, restless sleep briefly overtook him, almost immediately interrupted by the familiar, enticing notes of a maiden's voice, which twice spoke his name with tenderness. Gregory jumped out of his cot and ran to the platform, hoping to see the mermaid again. But there was no one around. True, you said you would come at night by the moon, but why did you appear earlier? Muttered the old man, staring at the murky surface of the lake. He feared that, if he even turned away from the water for a moment, he would miss yesterday's beauty, who appeared only for a moment to bestow her gift upon him. And to his horror, the recluse realized that he desired this gift more than anything else, not just for a moment, but entirely and for a long time. The monk spent the whole day on the stump, like a faithful guard on watch. He neither ate nor drank. It seemed he was directly bound to the waters of the lake by invisible ties that paralyzed his will. Afternoon, noticing the village children hiding in the bushes by the lake, spying on him, Gregory angrily threw a stick towards them. It seemed he even hit one of the children. By evening, fed it, muttering something under his breath, came to the hermit's house and found the monk in the same position as the children during the day. The fool was immediately expelled with curses and an order never to return. In horror, he ran away from the enraged old man with a wild look in his eyes. He arrived in the village in tears, scratching his hands and face bloody on the way through the forest. However, no one paid attention to his offended whining. What does a simpleton's complaints matter? As soon as dusk fell, the hermit began fervently reciting poems about the sea, specifically for her, for the divine mermaid, for the main purpose of his existence. And she came. More precisely, she swam up to the fisherman's pier, as promised, when the night fully asserted its rights, and the daytime light was replaced by a reddish full moon. The calm and absolutely peaceful lake allowed the old man to see everything. The mermaid overflowed with silvery laughter and smiled at Gregory, bewildered by happiness, but she did not climb onto the platform. She remained in the water, but with pleasure. She demonstrated to the monk the most seductive parts of her body, diving in front of him, swimming alternately on her back and stomach, just a few steps away from the hermit. "Come to me, I beg you, I beg you," Gregory implored her furiously, dancing with impatience at the very edge of the damp logs. But the mermaid only shyly smiled and moved away from the platform. Submerging into the water, the beauty emerged already in the middle of the lake and beckoningly waved her hand to the hermit. But he suddenly froze, struggling on a subconscious level with the growing desire to submit. Then the charming eyes of the mermaid filled with tears. She burst into tears and again called the old man to her. Unable to bear seeing her tears, the monk stripped off his clothes, plunged naked into the water, and with broad strokes began swimming towards her, now a joyously smiling inhabitant of the lake. Their bodies merged, their lips met in a fiery kiss, and the water around the lovers started to churn slowly at first, then faster, forming a vortex that grew and accelerated. But Gregory paid no attention. He reveled in the naked mermaid pressed against him and unconditionally submitted to her power. Even when the beautiful face of the girl, who held the limp monk firmly at the bottom of the endless whirlpool, suddenly transformed into green-black, moisture-swollen, decomposed outlines of a drowned woman, and a double row of needle-sharp teeth pierced his neck, the old man saw only her initial image before him. The blooded hermit felt no pain or fear, descending together with the mermaid into the depths of the lake, until his last heartbeat, his last breath, he felt immeasurable bliss. When the bodies of the monk and the mermaid disappeared beneath the dark, turbulent waters, and the swift whirlpool gradually slowed and ceased, the moonlight shimmered once again on the lake, as if nothing had happened just a minute ago. But there was a witness to this incredible event, foolish and not fully comprehending what was happening. Indignant with disbelief, Fedit returned to the monk and became a witness to the terrifying scene from the moment the old man plunged into the lake. Lost in thought, the fool emerged from his hiding place in the coastal bushes, glanced at the quiet forest lake, and muttered something like "the drowned has taken him," before slowly returning to the village. In the morning, he told the locals about what had happened. The idiot's speech, for the first time in his life, was so clear and correct that word of the hermit's death spread throughout the district. After unsuccessful searches for the old man Gregory in Pogrebnaya, the young investigator in Ozmtsav arrived with a sturdy assistant of eccentric appearance. He interrogated everyone he could and stayed with his colleague in a hut near the lake for several days. What he did there, no one knows. The locals couldn't be dragged there at gunpoint after Fedit's speeches. However, 2 days later, the investigator returned to the village and demanded a large, resin-sealed barrel to be made, as well as ordered a 2-horse carriage and the assistance of 3 sturdy men. The barrel was taken immediately. The cooper had one ready, and the next day, the men brought the carriage with the barrel to the lake. So, those men said that they could barely load a very heavy barrel, tightly corked, onto the carriage, and in that barrel, it could be heard, something was splashing and sighing. With that, Inozemtsov left. They say he was catching a werewolf from Valai, but that's a completely different story.